Fuck you. Welcome to One Piece.
All right, just calm down. We've got stuff to talk about. So, hello Sophie, hello Manu, hello Liam. I've gathered you all here today in a sort of, I guess I would describe it as a micro-reverie, because this is one of the most important One Piece chapters of our lives, and I'm excited and I need to discuss it. So let me put this to you immediately. Gear 5th, discuss.
This chapter, easily, probably the most impactful chapter of One Piece. Just because we had big chapters before, for example, last week or many of the weeks before in Wano, where like big reveals were dropped and like when Ace died and so on and so forth. All things that kind of were lore drop and changed the story, but this is the first that kind of completely shifted the perspective of the story in its entirety, which is something I've been waiting for forever. Because like I've always hoped that One Piece, our view on One Piece, that would end up as a story that like in slow changes will completely see the world differently. Kind of like in Attack on Titan, where like, oh no, it's not what it seemed to be. And I feel like that chapter was the first brick in the foundation for that ending.
So would you say that One Piece has finally become as good as Attack on Titan? That's a joke.
I wouldn't go that far.
It's interesting that you say that though, because at the same time, what I really loved about Gear 5th and what I loved about the chapter is that it's such a One Piece chapter in how goofy, in how fun and wacky it is. So I think you're absolutely right in how much Oda's big reveal changes things, but then at the same time, it's so true to what he's been saying about his series and about Luffy's Devil Fruit all along, that it's something that he wants to make people feel entertained and it's something that he wants people to have fun with.
It's very meta in a way, I feel like, because
Yes.
yeah, I think you've thrown it around on Twitter. I've seen other people talk about it, but it's really interesting how Oda is going the route of saying, oh, this is a power and like this is a person that brings laughter to people and like it's supposed to literally bring laughter to you as the reader as well. So I like the fourth wall element there.
As someone who got crucified on Twitter a couple of months ago for saying One Piece is a goofy pirate comic, I have to say I feel a little bit vindicated.
Hitting 1 million subscribers, nice. Getting vindicated on Twitter for your One Piece opinion, priceless.
I think we can all agree that, well, unless you were someone who didn't like the chapter and then, gonna have some problems there, but otherwise you really were smiling the entire chapter, like from beginning to end, when you first see that Luffy's actually back up and you're like, holy crap, we're seeing him as Sun God Nika, until the very end where you see Gear 5th, you're like, just ear to ear. I remember I was reacting to it on stream and my head actually physically hurt because I was smiling so much.
Was there really anyone who didn't like the chapter though?
Yeah, it's very rare, but there are a couple of people who absolutely hated it. And when I say a couple, I just mean a couple. Like, universally, it appears to be adored.
That's what I feel. Like, usually, with like every normal One Piece chapter throughout Wano, there's people, especially if there's something with Zoro or Sanji in them. I feel like there's a good chunk of people who are like, this was not a good chapter. I feel like I haven't come across a single comment so far yet that was like, oh, I didn't like this one actually.
Well, it's not so much that someone has disliked the entire chapter, but I've seen people who dislike bits and pieces of it. What the ramifications or what the implications of what
right.
Luffy's Devil Fruit's true nature is, what that means for Luffy.
But I have to give you props, Manu, because in our discussion on your channel, you pretty much called this when you brought up the mythical Zoan connection from the Momotaro story.
Actually, the one of the videos I'm most proud of on my channel is the Devil Fruits have a will of their own theory that was like never too crazily prominent. It was a video that did decently, but not crazy. And so that one, I think, might turn out to be actually one of the better ones.
Well, at the very least, you were 1/3 correct.
That's something.
Speaking of the true nature of Luffy's Devil Fruit, even though I do, champion the goofy pirate comic mantra, I don't think I quite ever expected to see Luffy quite literally turn into Bugs Bunny. So what are your thoughts on Looney Tune Luffy?
I really enjoyed it as well. I think it wasn't something that I was expecting, but it's something, again, that really you witness, and you go, only Oda and only One Piece could pull this off.
So I never did really enjoy cartoons, but what I think makes this really special is that Oda implies that Luffy can do almost anything with this Devil Fruit.
Well, that brings up something interesting, because a thought I've had that I'm going to put to you, Sophie, is do you think there are any limitations to this toon power. I guess one of the things I immediately thought about was that you do all of these wacky, invincible things in cartoons, but at the same time, cartoons don't generally cause actual damage either.
I do think that there will be some sort of limitation to Luffy's power. I think in some ways he will be able to imitate other abilities. He'll be able to imitate other devil fruits. Like you guys mentioned, we've seen it already as well. But I don't think that's just going to be completely limitless. And it's an interesting question that I've been trying to think of as well, because the way that we've seen him use his powers in the last chapter, in chapter 1044, it was still had to do with the properties of rubber. You know, he was still extending it to beyond his own body, and he was doing it, you know, to the floor, to Kaido's like bowler breath and things like that. And so it was interesting for me that he
also did it to Kaido, no?
Yeah, yes, exactly. But it still had to do with sort of that bouncy, rubbery, elastic effect. It wasn't necessarily like he's able to sort of just use any power just because his imagination allows him to.
Isn't the point, so maybe like it's really interesting. I think it's a legit argument, but the point I took away from the story and from the Gorosei with the most ridiculous power is kind of what people are arguing, oh, is that the strongest or not? I think saying it's the most ridiculous just means, and that it's feared means that it's just so versatile that it's basically unpredictable and only limited by one's imagination. Is kind of what I took
That did also
away.
come up, the freedom. It is the devil fruit that will give someone the most freedom, which is, you know, your classic Luffy response to things. It's not the strongest because he doesn't want to conquer the sea. It's the one that's going to make him the most free and slippery and able to defeat giant dragons.
It still seems to be one of the pretty much strongest fruits out there, nonetheless.
Because there is so much available in terms of freedom and versatility, are there any particular toon powers or like, I don't know what you would call them, like classic toon motifs that you would like to see happen?
Maybe I could say that I've already gotten part of my wish fulfilled, because the one thing that I really, you know, would have liked to see if I had known and if I'd anticipated that this is what we're going to get, and what we did actually get is Luffy banging and smashing Kaido around.
Doing the other Tom and Jerry.
Exactly, the Tom and Jerry, exactly, the hammer. The other thing that I just really want to see, which is Luffy turning into a giant. Because the one theory that I've sort of maintained throughout this whole thing, even before we realized or before we got the reveal that Luffy's devil fruit is actually not the Gomu Gomu no Mi, I always said that his awakening or his devil fruit has to be something related to Luffy being able to turn into a giant. And that's the one thing that I really want to see now.
And I think it's been foreshadowed quite a lot as well. It's like what you said, with Oars, we've basically already seen what a giant Luffy would look like.
And I think it also ties into the chapter title as well, the Warriors of Liberation. I can't help but feeling like we are really going to go to Elbaf next, or, you know, extremely soon.
Though I would say very soon might be a bit ambitious.
Yeah, I think that's ambitious.
Okay. I mean,
it depends what you mean by soon, yeah.
The fastest way I can see the fight with Kaido ending is still in like 10 to 15 minimum chapters until Kaido is actually defeated
halfway
and
through
Luffy
the year
wins.
at the very least.
Right? And that's like a minimum if it doesn't if not Kaido starts awakening his devil fruit next, which is maybe
And also not
interesting to
counting
talk
like
about.
extended flashbacks and all sorts of other shenaniganry.
That was the
can
next
pop up.
thing. Flashback
Splashback.
Kaido, I don't count that in the fight, definitely. and then there's so many other things that have been set up for Wano. You know, we have the Zoro story, what happened to Zoro. Just saying, like, there is, I think at minimum, we're still talking about like 50 chapters probably for Wano.
I'm kind of with you there. I am starting to have doubts about it finishing by the end of the year. I think it
Really?
will get very
Never,
close,
ever.
but playing it out in my mind, it is now almost April, and it still seems like we have so much left to cover. The raid, that could end by like mid-year-ish, but after that, there is still a lot of wrap-up to do.
A lot of wrap-up that will take up until the end of the year. I'm just thinking along
That's
the
only like
line-
10 to 15 chapters at that point.
I was saying, I wouldn't be surprised if we leave Wano end 2023. That's like my more realistic prediction, honestly.
Do you guys not also feel like that Oda feels the pressure to write and to include and, you know, go through the story a lot faster now, though?
I think we're at the point where it's like this arc has lasted 4 years. What's another year?
I do think so as well.
Sophie, I wanted to pose a very specific question to you because can you remind me when you caught up with One Piece?
I caught up when we were introduced to Yamato as a shadow.
I wanted to ask you because this is your first gear shift, as I would refer to it. What was that like? Because I've lived through this many of them now. What was that like for you, seeing a transformation appear for the first time?
That was part of the reason why I just absolutely love this chapter so much. Just on a personal level, it's just everything that I could have asked for in One Piece. And it reminded me of why I like One Piece so much, which is that you get transformed as if you were a child. When things, you enjoy things with just such pure joy and happiness in such an innocent way. And that was the pure feeling that I got reading this chapter and seeing Luffy's gear fifth. And I guess that's why when I've been reading comments that where people are a bit dissatisfied about certain elements, I'm like, everything. I just loved it.
I think that's fair enough. I think, yeah, and just from all the reveals I've lived through, visually, I have to say, Snake Man was really cool at that time. And also, like, I mean, I really, like, visually, I really loved it.
Great thing is that looking back on Snake Man, it is, basically the pre-step to this. The halfway point. And going back on Gear 4th as well, because that's when Luffy first got his vapor. What would you even call them? His vapor drip?
Yeah.
Without us knowing, he's just been stepping towards this particular form very gradually.
Let me ask you this, is, that Luffy going through these different forms is kind of relatable to, what Chopper has with its point system, right? With Gear 4th, you have these or the gear system in itself can be compared to the point system. And then in Gear 4th, you have these different forms. Do you feel like that is actually forms of the Nika fruit?
It's really hard to say that with Luffy. I've seen people refer to Luffy up until this point having been in his hybrid form. And it's something that I've, really had trouble understanding or come to, grips with, because at the end of the day, it's quite different to other Zoans because Luffy's had the Hito no Mi, and whereas Chopper as an animal had the human devil fruit makes a lot more sense, to categorize it in terms of full Zoan hybrid and, what have you. Yeah. It's different when it comes to Luffy, a human eating a human devil fruit.
Well, we do have an example of that because Sengoku did something similar, and he had a very clear, beast form, hybrid form, human form.
If Luffy being rubbery is part of him being in the hybrid form with Nika, and that means that's his hybrid form. Other than if just because I've eaten that devil fruit, even in my normal form, I still have these rubber properties.
I don't know. Mythical Zoans in particular are hard because they don't always necessarily obey the standard Zoan rules. But I'm a fan of Luffy has just been gradually gaining access to more and more of this power over time. It's not a straight up hybrid form. It's just a little bit more and a little bit more.
Well, then let me ask you this.
Oh, again, sure.
Will Luffy eat a rumble ball?
I was actually about to ask that. You would love to see that. And Luffy just going through guard point and horn point and all of Chopper's various things.
Do you guys think we're gonna see Kaido's awakening?
Yes.
I was going to say yes if we haven't already seen it. I'm still kind of split on that.
You mean the Magikarp Gyarados?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, is Luffy awakened now?
Yes.
Well, let me ask you this then. Now that Luffy is awakened, where do you think we go from here in the final saga? What is that one next power-up that's going to cap off the series?
There's a couple of things that I think could happen. So, for example, one thing is that Luffy has now awakened this form, but it's a different kind of like hockey, like with the Conqueror hockey burst he had on Marineford. So the question is, can he just now, anytime he wants to, just quickly slip into his awakened form? I personally don't think that's the case. He will only understand who and what he exactly is once he meets Shanks. I feel like Shanks is going to be the one who's actually going to explain it to him what the real potential is.
That was going to be another one of my questions. Do you think Luffy will ever find out what fruit he has? And I kind of hope he doesn't. I hope that he just keeps going through the series thinking, yeah, I'm a rubber man.
I think that's how he's seeing it. It's just, oh, okay, this is just my if this is my awakening, if this is my gift, fifth, as he's just termed it, I think he's just associating it as, what he's experienced of other people's awakenings. Makes sense that I can extend, the rubber properties beyond my own use of it.
Thank you both so much for taking the time to come on. And a fun thing, the three of us actually have a podcast together. It's called the Blue Banana Podcast, where we talk about anything and everything. I'm not going to lie, it's much less about fictional pirates and much more about stories of Sophie's toilet adventures, because we've had quite a few of those now. But there will be a link in the description to the Blue Banana Podcast and a pinned comment if you're interested. And because I don't know how to end videos, Sophie, say goodbye.
No.
Manu, say goodbye.
Like and subscribe.
Liam, say goodbye. Goodbye.